Now, I have the pleasure of introducing the first speaker. He's a futurist and creative technologist who loves making things, and his think by making approach has been quite fruitful in the design of his products for clients like HP, Microsoft, LG, SanDisk, Motorola, and more. I'm told he was a one-time cowboy. You may know him as directing the South by Southwest interactive opening parties for years. You may know him as the co-director of Austin Public Skate Park Action Committee. You may know him as the chief creative technologist at Argo Design. Everyone, please help me welcome Jared Ficklin.
Hello, Toronto. It's so good to be with you again. And I'm very happy to talk about, well, I guess the future or where we're at now. But before I do, I have some important information to deliver. And that is that Joey says hi. And if you know, you know. He misses you very much, as I do. And he'd love to come up to Canada again. But today, I'd like to talk about like some of the transitions that are happening in our digital lifestyle. Like it's been some heavy stuff that's been going on lately in the world. And while that's been happening, the march of technology has not stopped. Innovation seems to be at a furious pace, and it seems to be something that's really kind of hard to understand. It has us questioning a lot of aspects of how things are done and even our own selves. And, when I reach a moment like that, and I'm like, oh, how do I figure out how to understand this new technology and how it might impact us? I tend to throw a party. So let's start there. We threw a party recently. We called it party.me so we could examine hyper-personalization and changes in technology. Well, mostly it was also to welcome our new studio into the world. We built a new studio in Austin, Texas on South Congress. And if you're ever in town, please ping me and come and visit us. We're really proud of this place. So we wanted to have an open house. And we're like, and you might be asking yourself, well, why did you even build a studio? Because aren't we all working remote now? Well, in our world, we felt that collaboration was really important in order to solve the really complex problems. When you're a designer speaking to another designer, about half of what you say is emotional. It comes across in nonverbal communication or in the eyes or in the feeling. Also, there's a certain lack of permissiveness online in order to have collegiate debate and help yourself get to the really unique solution. So we were finding that without that face-to-face presence and feeling of each other and energy, and without the whiteboards to quickly come to solutions, we were slowly falling behind. So as soon as it became safe, we said, let's reopen our studio and all come back together and work. But I guess also mostly we needed a place to park our bike. So there's the Argo bike right there. And we said, let's have a party. And what should our theme be? Well, it was just before South by Southwest, and Austin had been invaded by, if you pardon the term, crypto bros. And even Dolly was creating her own crypto and Dollyverse. We said, you know what, let's create a crypto for our party. And then we started examining the issues with crypto from a very design point of view. And we realized, holy cow, you have to have your phone with you. It's all digital and you need some sort of wallet. And you have to remember an authentication. And the exchange is not exactly fluid. And we're like, how could we solve that? We're like, I know. We'll create a physical token for our crypto, which we've decided to call Kcoin. And it'll be something small, kind of like a little token, if you will, that you could just put in your pocket and easily carry around. And when you needed to transact, you would just pull it out and hand it to someone else. We're like, wow, what a great design solution. So we'll have Kcoin at our party. We'll give everyone a stake of 25 Kcoins before we start. When we were like, what are we going to do with the Kcoin? Okay, well, we need to create a market for the Kcoin. And what are the four fundamentals of any economy? Well, one, people are going to want to buy stuff. So we created premium swag that you could buy with Kcoin, and including the coffee maker we designed, just various things that people could have. And then there was also, there are a lot of people who prefer to spend their value on experiences. So we created a couple of premium cocktails, and we're like, well, we'll set a price for those. people who want premium cocktails can buy them. And then there are people who are motivated altruistically. So we put these little donation box, and for every K coin that dropped in a box, we decided we would donate $1 to support Black Girls Code, because one of our missions is raising diversity in technology and design. And we really believe it begins at the fundamental portions of education. And this is a good organization that does that. And then, of course, there's people who would like to speculate. They would like to invest and grow their money. And so we created a CFT marketplace. We're like, well, if people want to own something, maybe we could give them the feeling of owning something, but we would have to record that. And so we made basically we made something that we called K ownership. And we have this lovely Cobra, the logo, our espresso machine, our plotter, Aeron chair. We're like, we'll put these all up and we'll let people buy K ownership of them. But in order to record that, we're like, we're going to need a way to record the odor. So we decided we would create something that we call a CFT, which we call a completely fungible token. And if someone were to buy K ownership of one of these objects, we would record it on, well, this board you see behind Pat Marsh here, which we decided would become a block board. And we would enter someone's name on this board. And once their name was entered on this board, it would be written and copied to every other block board in the studio, therefore listing them as the K owner of, say, the Cobra. And I know at this point you're asking, well, what does K ownership get you? Well, what K ownership gets you is the ability to tell other people you have K ownership of the Cobra. It does not get you actual ownership of the Cobra. It does not get you access to the Cobra. It does not get you the ability to drive the Cobra. In fact, we would prefer if you didn't touch the Cobra. All you got was K ownership of the Cobra. But you can sell K ownership to other people. The price doubles every time you sell it. There is a $25 K coin fee that in order to register the change of CFT, and that would be paid to Black Girls Code. There's also a heavy debate of whether it's pronounced K ownership or Connership. We're not sure. Either way, it would give people a chance to have something to invest in. All right, so what does the K stand for? Well, we realized that people needed a way to have an economy. People are going to need to earn K coin. The K, in fact, stands for karaoke. Our crypto is karaoke coin. I've always been fascinated with this idea that you could, instead of having proof of work, have proof of talent. And so this is how you earn K coin, is with proof of talent. So we set up various experiences. One of them was, in fact, karaoke. And if you went and sang karaoke, we would then give you another 25 K coin. Or if you sang really well, you could earn even more K coin. So proof of talent made sure that K coin was flooding the marketplace. We also had other activations that you could participate in order to proof of talent more K coin. We made a meta mirror, and the meta mirror accumulated your data and your image, and using simple GAN tricks showed you your meta me. This is something I've been talking about a long time. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more later. We also had things like the Wisteria. The Wisteria is a sculptural flower you see here to the right, something I've been working on to bring out to Burning Man. And here's a little video that will show you exactly what it does.
The mature Wisteria flower, it has grown so much, and it is willing to give us its wisdom, so long as we are willing to work for it.
And a speech synthesizer. You must forgive it the American accent. I have not been able to teach it proper English. I shall try to give an outline of what we think is the history of the universe, from the Big Bang to black hole.
So it's essentially a music box for spoken word, and that's kind of an interesting dynamic that it changes, because people sit there and crank, and then people around them start listening to the Wisteria, and then they go to stop because they're tired, and everyone goes, no, keep going. So the Wisteria was there. We also made ourselves a what we called a silent tour. I looked into doing this with the actual silent tour headphones. It was going to be very expensive. And then I realized that FM headphones are incredibly cheap on Amazon. These battery powerable rechargeable ones were like $9. And then these things are like $9 each. These are like little Bluetooth transmitters that are very low power FM. And so we bought about a dozen of these and we hid them in the studio, and you can put a USB key in them and it will loop whatever's on the USB key. So then we were able to record audio for different stops. And we kind of chose a podcast style that sounded like this. You'll get the gist of this really quickly.
Hi, welcome to Serial. Just kidding. Okay, this is stop 4 of the silent tour. You're doing really good, and I really thank you for continuing on the tour. You should be somewhere around the meta mirror. We work a lot in physical, but we do a lot of work in digital product as well, and we really live the digital lifestyle, and we're kind of in a time in history where there is literally a data version of yourself online that represents you and even starts taking agency, like booking appointments for you. So we thought maybe we'd spin up an activation that could show you your digital self, something we call.
Right, so you could walk around the studio with these headphones on and learn a little bit about the studio, learn a little bit about Argo, but every now and then you'd run into this.
Whew, I mean, recording's fun. I feel like Dr. Dre.
What?
I know. Okay, before we do to stop number 8, you know that lockbox we have filled with a bunch of extra K-coin? That's hidden really well, right?
I mean, I did tell everybody that it's in the smallest conference room and the 3-digit code to the lock.
I think you're being sarcastic. Okay, it's in the smallest conference room and it's in a lockbox. That's good because there's so much K-coin in there. If someone hacked into that box, I mean, they could destroy the economy of the party.
Yeah, it has so much K-coin in it.
They could buy like every stack unit.
Or more.
All right, well, I'm sure some crypto bro will do a session on this downtown. But in the meantime, thank you for hiding it. All right, let's record stop number 8.
Okay. I
Yeah,
think
you may
we
have
started.
noticed we were a little sensitive during South by Southwest with how our city was filled. But yes, we had a cache of K-coin that could be hacked into. So basically this whole tour was really just cover for an escape room type puzzle. And it was highly successful. We kind of expected no one to really lean into it, but 3 people managed to find and decipher the codes, which required listening to all 12 stops and locating the box during the party. One of them was the CEO of a company called Icon that 3D prints homes. And I thought it was really fascinating. He chose to spend his time that way. We also had something I call radical stillness. Radical stillness is an activation that is a repurposing of the augmented reality porta potty units. And what is happening here, she's sitting on a sensor and it's got some fidgets in it and some pressure sensors strategically placed, and it's measuring stillness. And each of the boxes here are accumulating stillness. And as they do, they roll over and produce first a message, and then they start building a panorama. So if you can sit completely still for 5 minutes, you can be transported to a future version of downtown Austin that included all the planned buildings, including one that's going to be the tallest building in Texas soon. Just an example of how quickly the city is growing. And then they all roll back peacefully. It's an interesting experience for people. People have various reactions, but a common one is I haven't sat this still in a very long time. And I think it's interesting that technology both moves us constantly, but also could help us be calm. It's all in how we design the technology and decide to deploy it. We have very much control of this situation still at this moment. Of course, so what the result of this was now that you had ways through proof of talent to earn K-coin and you had ways to spend K-coin, we had a market. Now we kind of pushed this market along with an interface because we needed to track the market. And it was a highly volatile market, as you can see by this readout. And down in the lower hand corner, you'll notice that there were moments during the party, this is a screenshot from about 3/4 through, where things got so volatile that the price of the cocktails actually inverted. So people would be asking how much K-coin it was to buy a cocktail, and instead they got the cocktail and a handful of K-coin back. We paid them to drink the cocktail because K-coin is just that volatile. And people bought a lot of swag. They really leaned into this. My brother spent most of the party attempting to take over K ownership of all the items of Argo and tracking down complete strangers by their names alone. However, I have to report that sadly, the block board security broke down greatly. And pretty soon, the definition of what was a CFT quickly got adjusted to something else. Therefore, in the end, we had to just bail out on K ownership of things. Someone got stuck with the bag, but I think most of the K coin went to Black Girls Code in the end. So it was a really fun examination, and I guess tongue placed firmly in cheek in terms of how things are changing. But mostly, it was just really good to be in and amongst a crowd of people. And I feel the same thing about FITC. So I just want to say that I miss you all. I genuinely miss you all. I genuinely miss being in the room with you. And I think it would be impossible to open this Gears Festival without just talking a little bit about what we've all been through. You know, I speak a lot about the digital lifestyle itself. And for years, I've been showing things like this, where we immerse ourselves so deeply, like we ignore our own real world safely. But the whole time this was a choice, and it changed a lot when it was no longer really a choice, right? We were all found ourselves for 2 years where this immersion in technology was our connection to humans. And at the beginning, it was very, very hard. It was hard for me in particular, and everyone else, I think, as well. And suddenly, this technology kind of changed. And I think this moment also changed our view of it. It made us quite sensitive to the idea that a very few people with certain personalities and certain desires that may not be aligned with our needs owned all this technology and owned all this platforming. And I think during that moment, the idea that we should have a greater stake in it took hold. And I think that's why for the rest of the week, we're going to be talking a lot about some of the early outcomes of that, the early stages of Web3. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. But the next thing that happened to us is we all became squares. We started talking to each other again through platforms that were very basic and quite democratic in ownership. What happened on Zoom was what you were doing on Zoom. And Zoom didn't really have any option for editing it from you, right? And so it felt like a more human connection, and it felt like you had greater ownership of the experience. And I would offer that the ownership we were looking for was really self. We were really just looking and asking ourselves, had we lost ourselves? Even art itself became squares during this period, which is something we talked a lot later. And we started playing in this technology and saying, how many of these real world experiences, such as performance art, really translate? So here's something I did for the House of Beautiful Business. They wanted to do 1 hour of silence with about 400 people online. And so I reprogrammed Radical Stillness to take a full hour to complete a panorama of Lisbon. And I sat there as someone I call Solari Solarius, wearing a 15-pound mask for an hour. It's extremely uncomfortable and a very interesting thing. But because it was in silence, it was interesting to be doing something like this, whereas the only connection was through Zoom. It really didn't feel the same. It's worth noting that we all had kind of different experiences during this time. A lot of us made bubbles, sat at home, and were very much just working in life as one continuous circle. Some of us couldn't handle that and went out and explored the world, and it was an empty world. And we may have paid a little bit of penalty for that as well. But I think what's important to take away from this was also some people were having very horrible, tragic experiences. Death was intersecting a lot of our lives. And what this adds up to is there was asymmetry. And I think as you move around this conference this week, this is an important thing to remember. We've all had an enormous amount of asymmetry over the last 2 years. Everyone has had a very different experience going through it. And I think this extends out to the wider world itself. So just be generous with each other is what I'm trying to say, that when you sit there, it's easy to feel like someone was maybe being flippant about the last 2 years, or it feels real uncomfortable to find out how hard this hit someone. Just remember that we weren't fully in control of that there was a lot of asymmetry out there, and that on the other side of that is a richness of experiences where we have a greater opportunity to learn from each other than we perhaps had in the past. Okay, so I don't think it stopped just with us and our experiences in regards to the pandemic. In general, in the world of technology, we're seeing a great amount of asymmetry. In fact, entire companies that rebranded themselves as Meta are trying to, cement that asymmetry. I'll talk about this a little bit later, how there has always been asymmetry in computing, and that some of the technologies that will come will end that. I will, in the art world, this idea, or even in general, past the art world, this idea that the object and ownership are the same thing has become more asymmetrical. The idea that data online and myself are two different things. There's an asymmetry between the digital self and the real me that exists. And I'm going to attempt to put a different framing on this for you. I think what we are seeing, and there'll be a lot of lenses this week, which is great, but here's one lens. I think what we're seeing is that pipelines are becoming platforms. All right, let me explain that a little deeper, right? You have Uber, who is the world's largest taxi company, and they don't own any vehicles. You have Facebook, the world's most popular media company. They create zero content. You have Alibaba, who's the most valuable retailer. They have no inventory. You have Airbnb, which is the world's largest accommodation provider, who owns no real estate, okay? These are all signs, as Tom Goodwin puts out, that something very interesting is happening. So what has happened, perhaps, is that connectivity has essentially made everything a platform. Now, to understand platforms, let's understand how traditional pipeline businesses work and what they are. Right now, you might be struggling to identify what this is, but there's a very simple example, okay? Pipeline products are things that we're kind of more used to, where there is a pipeline of resources that take various values, often we call them features, and places them directly into the product, right? So here's an illustration of a pipeline business, right? You gather together a lot of artists, you put a certain amount of technology into satellites, you create certain receivers in vehicles and streaming that allow you to tune in that satellite signal from anywhere on Earth. And ultimately, at the end of that, you have Sirius XM radio, right? Which is the product. And you know that you can tune in anywhere. And there is a supply side scale that creates a virtuous cycle here. Let me give you a second example that might be a little closer to home. The auto industry is a great example of a pipeline product, okay? They marshal the ability to buy steel, raw goods. They build these factories that stamp them into plates, and they use workers and these days robotics, all manner of engineering and design to assemble it into a vehicle. And they pack that vehicle with a lot of features in order to attract a customer. Customer may or may not want all those features, but they see all the value in that singular product. You now can manipulate your pipeline in a few ways. You can find cheaper steel. You can have more modern factories. You can put out more vehicles. You can increase more features in them. The more people that buy your vehicles, the cheaper your steel gets. The cheaper your steel gets, the more money you can put into features, the more users you can get, right? but someday cars will look like this, right? And the reason they look like this is because they want to match the user's personality. And a lot of pipeline products appeal to users very directly in that way. Whereas when cars become platforms, they're going to support features in a different way. Here's how platforms work. Okay, platforms, first of all, have always existed. The marketplace is a great example of a platform, right? This is a night market in Asia, right? And basically, it's a group of real estate that gives space to certain people. Sometimes it curates that space and decides we want a certain number of these times to shop. Sometimes we want these times to shops, but they own the land. The shops own their shopkeepers. The people come and shop, right? So it's something that looks like this. This is what a marketplace looks like as a platform company. You have the consumer at the top, you have producers, you have the network owner, which is the person that owns the night market, and then you have the provider, the people who bring in the stalls, right? And they buy from the producer, and then they sell to the consumer, and they pay off the night market person who tries to get more consumers to buy more of the provider and the producer. So it's a big web. Right, let's move that to a transportation networking company example, right? Such as Lyft, right? You have the network owner, the producer who of the automobiles, the provider, the person who owns the automobile and drives, and the consumer who has the app and books a car. Web3 only changes this slightly. It does not make platform thinking obsolete, but these platforms are making things asymmetrical, right? So what Web3 attempts to do in a certain way is decentralize certain controls to make things a little more democratic. It, for example, turns the end user perhaps into a governing body of the platform, or but the underlying model here is still platform dynamics, okay? So essentially what Web3 is doing is taking the platform structure and rotating the roles. And once it rotates those roles and puts the end user, the network owner space, it puts the scooter in the consumer spot. Just a way to think about it. Now, these slides come from a coworker of mine, Theo, who is amazingly smart. And Sean, we should book him for a future FITC to give this full presentation. All right, so there's a little bit of a thinking for you, some framing that we are entering the era of platform over pipeline. And I'm going to transition here slightly when we think of Web3. I'm not going to give a more of a definition or framing of Web3 than that, because I think that's what you're going to be doing for the whole rest of the sessions, right? But I am going to say this, and I found this on Twitter, and it really made me think for a moment. You know, we had the internet. And it was like, oh, look, information for everybody. When you meet your Gen X colleagues, this is the world we grew up in, where information was free. And that was the priority of the internet, was to bring as much information to as many people as possible, regardless of the quality of that information and with no censorship of that information. Then we entered the era of Web 2.0. Oh, well, as long as this is all out there, we might as well make some money off of it. And we began consolidating information into platforms. And this is when subscription as a service became a business model. And we had Web 2.0. There's times where Web 3.0 feels like it's all money. How much money can we make off the web? Off of the connectivity, off of the platforms, everything a platform, everything money, everything ownable. So I want to create a W3 wish list for humanity, because I think we all agree that even though that's a perception, that's not what we're hoping the outcome would be. And even though some of the early forays into this decentralized ownership have become highly speculative in an unhealthy manner, with too much consolidation at the top and a lack of regulation, to the point where the structures themselves begin to look like the dark corners of the finance world. I think we actually wish and hope for more. We see a lot more potential there. And here is my wish list for humanity. This is what I'll close with, and then we'll get into a Q&A. First, how about a data marketplace? Okay. Right now, the big five own our data, and they see themselves as the sole owners of it, and we give it to them willingly in exchange for features. But we're starting to understand that actually our data is valuable And to be frank, if you look closely, the platforms themselves are starting to find this data to be a burden. Honestly, I think if there was a really good API and data marketplace, everyone except Facebook would quickly begin using that API and be happily offload that, just like we offloaded image storage to S3, right? And if we had a data marketplace, what would that look like? So we worked on this concept called the me ring, okay, where we wanted to visualize the end state. And we really wanted to make a few points that if you had a data marketplace, first of all, you would need to transact with data as frictionlessly and as simply as money, right? So we imagined this token, this ring that you would wear on your finger, and you would use it to control your data, and it would be backed up with an app that looked like a banking app, right? And you could just switch your data on and off when you wanted to. You could also use it to join and enter contracts. As we were doing this, we realized, though, that when you think about money, there's a vernacular. There's a whole jargon that has evolved around transactions. If I spot you a 20, it's different than me loaning you $50, right? And there's credit. And then there is mortgage, then there is cash, there is Venmo, so we actually have an entire language around money, and we're going to need a similar language around data, right? Because data is just as various, and the ways we use it are differently. So we started playing with this idea that, if you had a vernacular, if I told you that I was going to take your community data, and you knew that community data was anonymized, right? It was an anonymous taking of maybe just demographics from me, right? If I knew that was just like cash, which cash is an anonymous transaction, I would be more willing to give it up, knowing that that was the agreement that we had made with each other these days. That's not how it's done today. Today they say, "Can I have your data?" And what they mean is, I'm going to take all of it, not just what I need. So you could have medical data, right? Which would be slightly different. This is highly secure data, but needs to be attached to your identity, right? So if I was going into the subway and I scanned my ring, and it could confirm that I was vaccinated and therefore give me access to the train, right? It's very important that that is to my data, right? You can start imagining that there's a lot of different categories of data, and that they are not all equal. I think the current system keeps them equal, and the idea of thinking of data as a right keeps them equal, right? But there's, the right to privacy for data really only applies to some of our data. Like what I had for lunch is not something that needs like a huge encryption network to keep secret, right? So you can have pro data, civic data, me data, likeness data, and it starts building interesting things. Like, for instance, if we had a good marketplace and we had an interface for exchanging the data, right? So look at this upper left image, right? Let's say I was shopping and I left my jacket somewhere, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I lost my jacket, right? Let's say I could pull out an app that's called Find Your Jacket, right? And the app basically asks me, can I use your likeness data in order to locate your jacket? That's a contract, okay? We speak these contracts all the time when it comes to money, and it's time to learn how to start speaking them with data, right? So we've made a contract that says you can use my likeness to find my jacket. As soon as you finish with that, you'll get rid of my likeness. You won't keep it anymore, right? And so they could make me that offer. I could use the little switch on my ring to say, yes, I agree to that, right? And then they would go out to the data marketplace. They would then enter into contract with the closed network camera system to say, like, I'm going to search for likeness data of this person. They could get a return. They could scrub that footage. They could see the moment where my jacket was left behind, and they could send me a little message that says, your jacket's over in the Gap. I would go and pick it up and take it back. That's a really cool feature. And you can imagine millions of features like this if you set aside the scariness of your right to privacy and lean into the idea that you could have a data marketplace that you had control of. Now, the assumption now is the contract is over. I give you $1, you erase all my likeness data until the next time you want to use it. Right? There's other things that could happen when we had this kind of like fluidity of data marketplace. So here, the city of New York is deciding, should we turn this subway into an express lane, right? Well, this is, to me, the path to hyper democracy, right? If you have such a simple frictionless data exchange, there's certain concerns that don't have to happen by election every 2 years. In fact, they could happen nearly in real time. They could act almost like a Reddit-like network where the users of this system passing through the gate can vote with their ring one way or the other and say, I would like this to become an express line, right? And also there's moments where you could just shut yourself off, right? If you have control of your data and you want to be immediately private or anonymous, you just throw the red switch, right? And if you turn it on, now you're sharing your data, right? Maybe there's even gradations of this sharing where I'm only going to share likeness data or civic data right now, or I'm going to share it all. Maybe there's taps, right? But like a credit card, in order to have a data marketplace, we're going to have to get these interfaces and we're going to have to get the marketplace set up. It's something that's happening likely, and I think the technologies of Web3, blockchain in particular, would be very useful for these types of systems. So it's on my wish list for W3. Another one is a new computing metaphor, okay? I've talked about wearable mobile computing a ton, okay? We spent the last 3 years as strategic design partners to Magic Leap. The product we were working on for most of that time is finally releasing the ML2 headset. It's an amazing signal of miniaturization for Magic Leap and an interesting product in general. It is still a dev kit though. However, let me talk about computing for a moment, if you will. There are two sides to computing. We think of it as one side, but that's mostly because who we are as digital workers, okay? Computing workflows in general in business and in life kind of divide into two categories. You have abstract workflows that don't require physical objects. And then you have physical workflows, like going out and mowing your lawn or maintaining the equipment in a factory or building an aircraft engine, right? Computing has pretty much, through the form factors from handheld mobile to desktop computing, taken over all the abstract workflows. Even choosing a restaurant, which is an abstract thought exercise, typically takes us to the phone these days. So all our socialization, entertainment, information planning, accounting, operations, planning, strategy, design, 100% computing, and that's immersive computing. When we do that computing on screens, because of the asymmetry of it all, I can actually warp myself around an entire building before it's even built in this immersive landscape, right? And if you were to look at the metaverse and virtual reality, it's just adding another little sliver into this other already existing immersive area of computing, of which we spend about 50% of our life. On the right-hand side, you have physical workflows, like repairing those machines. And yes, there's a certain amount of portable, like handheld mobile devices have made inroads there, but the screens themselves are a barrier to using computing for extra productivity in this space, right? Heads-up displays, glasses. When these Magic Leap 2 become glasses, we'll start using them as consumers. They're beginning to be used in enterprises today, and what they're being used for is the value of placefulness, okay? Placefulness that comes from my partner in the business, Mark Ralston, and I'll explain it quickly this way. If you are a maid for a hotel right now, you open up an app. It's really just a web app. You go through a lot of interface to authenticate. You go down into what's my workflow for today, and eventually you get to a room. And then you back out and you go to another room, and you back out and you go to another room, okay? And what it's telling you is which ones need service or not. Placefulness removes all of that interface sheerly by the fact that if I could anchor that interface next to the room, I don't have to do any of that navigation, because the extra context from being located specifically in space gives me that information, right? So for physical workflow workers, this is really important because it saves them a lot of time and it creates better safety, and it fits more into the way that they have to work heads up and present, right? So a factory worker could get a series of applications laid out on a series of layers that they have permission to see, right? So what's missing from this scenario is the anchors and a really good system for which you can hit an ICANN-like database and return a specific location with an access with the right permission controls hung on it. I think the technologies and decentralization of Web3 offer us a route to that as well. So it's on my Web3 wish list. Another one is actual sustainability, okay? Somehow In the last 10 or 15 years, environmentalism has become an issue solely related to climate change and has left out ecology. We focus so much on fume reduction that we're literally cutting down jungles for cobalt, and we're fracking lithium out of the deserts of Peru in order to rush ourselves to electrification. And then we are computerizing at the same time. So first of all, I don't know why we're trading biodiversity for minerals. We need to be smarter about this. But also there's this problem. This is a chart put together by the NSA. What you have on this upward sloping line is the amount of energy it takes to do the computations that humanity wants to, and the change over time. So this is our trend line for the amount of energy we're using to do just computations, okay? And then at the top is a very slightly upward curving trend line, which is the world energy production. And somewhere around 2040 is when they cross over. So unless we drastically change the way we do computing, or we drastically change the way we do energy production, we're going to run out of electricity. And this does not even acknowledge the fact that we're trying to bring on, take all of our mobility as humanity and convert it to electrical as well. So I just think we need to maybe take a step back and think about this. A couple things need to change. One is the architecture of computing. And one thing to look into, and I'll speak about in the future, but not too deeply today, is analog computing. Analog computing is coming on board now and is a huge energy saver, and it moves intelligence to the switches. And I can tell you that our little cloud architecture computing scheme that we have right now, within 15 years is going to look very different with a lot more computing on the edge. All right, let me close with purpose. This is on my wish list too. My wish list is that the purpose of Web3 is not that it's all about money. My wish that it is feeding into a greater human purpose, which is to create as much love and intellect as possible. Because we will soon find these to be physical forces that are important in the universe. And each human, we should be trying to create as much love and intellect as possible. I'm working on a book about this called The Solarian Myth. You can always ask me about it in the halls, which I guess is on Twitter or in certain chat rooms. Let me close with these statements. There's some principles that we could apply in our design work, maybe in our art, maybe in our conversations, or maybe our evaluations of how we create love and intellect with technology. And that is that technology should exist in service of humanity. We should look for technology to amplify humanity, not emulate humanity. We should see privacy as a virtue, each of us, rather than trying enforcing it as a right. We won't need to enforce it as a right if we truly take it on as a virtue. We should lean into presence with each other, not escapism from each other. And we should seek authenticity rather than simply influence. And with those statements, welcome to FITC. Let's have a very good week. If we have any time left over, let's have some Q&A. And
we do.
I thank you greatly.
That was a great way to start things off, Jared. Thank you so much. That was awesome. You gave me a lot to think about, and I thought I'd already thought through some of these issues. Now I don't know, I'm rethinking a lot. There's some amazing use cases in there, not only for just Web3, but for technology in general that were really exciting. Everybody, if you want, you can ask questions in Crowdcast. You just click the Ask a Question button and they'll pop up, and I'll see those and I can ask them to Jared. Sean Pucknell, who's obviously the founder of FITC, has already asked a question of you, Jared. And it's an interesting one. Do you own any NFTs or crypto yourself personally?
I tried to put my soul into the drop later today, but Sean said no. It made him feel too much like the devil. I guess he really believes in the ownership model. I don't own any NFTs and I don't own any crypto.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say that that is any kind of conscientious objecting.
Okay.
In any way. It's just, I have personally found investing in the physical things to be fruitful enough my own personal risk tolerance is such that I don't tend to go towards things that can be more speculative. I am a buy and hold type of person. On the NFT side, I think all the ones I would want are too expensive.
Yeah.
And price
Yeah.
out. And so far, I haven't reached a moment where I'm like, oh my God, people didn't post today. I better buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm getting the fulfillment from it there. I do, however, buy art. And I saw this question earlier. This is an artist who goes by the name of Dan Schwab, and he makes these amazing laser cut masks that I don't know how close I can get this, but every inch of these is symbology. I also own a lot of Steve Keen, who is a painter who believed that everyone should be able to own art, and therefore he uses mass production techniques that when he does a painting, he does 500 exact copies and then sells them for $5 each in little cardboard boxes around Manhattan. So I guess, that's where I am at.
You found your way to participate in something that matters to you, which reminds me, if I can ask quickly, we only have 3 minutes, but Burning Man is a really important part of your life, I believe. And I can't help think about how, it seems to show up in many of the projects you do and the way you work. And even the fact that you wanted to do a party as an exploration of technology. Is that fair? Like is that accurate? Like how has Burning Man kind of influenced you? And do you think it's important in that way?
Well, they say don't take anything to the burn you don't want to lose, including yourself. And I guess that kind of happened. I would say it's a combination of the Burn and Cory Doctorow and this idea that humanity, through the balance of technological and biological evolution, can lead ourselves to the abundance, a post-capitalist existence. And Burning Man is kind of a dress rehearsal for a post-scarcity society. And so as a product designer, though, we also always hope that that's what we're helping do, that we're helping to create products that have value for humanity, and that we're not just steering us towards a peak technology where they do nothing to help us there. It has had a huge influence.
That's great.
On my career. Its influence is more on my personal hobby and passion of interactive art.
Okay.
That passion is also fed by my career in product design, and it also feeds stuff into product design. So there is a virtuous cycle.
Loops and loops. Got you. Yeah. I want to ask one more question from the audience. Well, there was a bunch that just kind of came in here, and we only have about 1.5 minutes left. But I'm just going to, let's see. Yeah, this is a good one, I think, just because it's something you started to touch on, and probably don't have time to address it fully, but how accessible, and I suppose you have to define that word however you want, how accessible is Web3 going to be? It says newer technology seems to be very expensive and restricted to richer people. So I'm curious how accessibility to all people is going to look. And that's from Liam McKenzie.
It's something we need to address. The current forms and tactics of Web3 are really weirdly computationally heavy and place an undue burden on the client side. This is feeding into that electricity problem that I highlighted, but it also features into a usability problem, right? We're not going to get people as interested in this with as much friction as there is. And so we're seeking, I think it's important for us to seek ways where the value of democratizing these things does not create such a heavy burden, right? Or what will happen is those who care about it most, the adhocracies, or those who get there first, or those who are willing to go through the hoops, will end up owning the most of it. I think that's what we're seeing right now. And I call that the tyranny of the organized. And we have to be careful about that. Let's not create a tyranny of the organizer or a system where that is so complex that only those can figure out will benefit from it. That's just a perpetuation of everything for how complicated it is to read a deed or buy a house into a new market.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah. We are right at time. So I want to thank you, Jared, for an awesome presentation. Great responses to these questions. I hope to hang with you in person soon. And we